Alright guys, welcome back to the show. Now, we've got our head rebuilt, we got our engine cleaned, we got our engine honed, we got everything ready to go back together. So in this episode, we're going to put this thing back together and it'll run good, I hope. Should. So let's get some pistons in these holes here. They look a little empty. Helpful hint, your bearing tabs always go to the exhaust side. So if you're in the car, they go to the front. If you're building it on an engine stand, make sure you know which side is the exhaust. But this side always goes to the exhaust. If you put them on backwards, your crankshaft won't spin. Alright, so we got all our pistons in, and I went and double checked in the old Haynes manual there to double check my torque specs, and I'm glad I did too, because 33 pounds is for the first gen rods, and then the third gen cars have different rods in them, and the torque specs is actually different, probably because they changed from using a nut and a stud scenario to using a bolt. And so the torque spec on these third gen con rods is actually 19 pounds and then 75 degrees. So I got my torque angle gauge, and we'll go torque these things up. We might just eyeball it. 75 degrees isn't that hard to eyeball. Alright, so we got our new head gasket. Alright, so the head's back on, and now we're going to torque it down. We're going to go in sequence 1, 2, around in a circle. And we're going to go 22 foot-pounds, then 33 foot-pounds, then 90 degrees. That's for the SOHC. DOHC, I think it goes to 22, 37, and then 90. But here we go. There we go. I'll torque the spec. I would recommend when you do that, make sure that all your pistons are sitting in the middle of the block. Don't have two up all the way at top dead center. Have them all in the middle, just in case these ones have open valves and the crank position isn't matching the cam position because you haven't timed the motor yet. So when I was putting the head on, I realized I'd done that, so I jumped under the car and I pushed the crankshaft so that they're all sitting in the middle, and then I bolted the head down. Otherwise you could run the risk of bending valves or something as you smash them into a piston as you torque them down. So don't do that, because that would suck. Alright, so I'm going to try to explain the timing chain, because there's not a lot of room there to get a camera in there to actually show you what's going on. Maybe I'll do a better video when I build an engine on a stand and really go through it. But for the basics, on the SOHC there's one black link there, and there's two black links down here. These will sit on the bottom, perfectly on the bottom, like that of your crankshaft. And then all the slack goes on the left side of the chain, and this side should be fairly tight. You kind of have to put it on like this. You can't put the gear on and then try to get the chain on. It just will not work. And you'll need what size is this? 7/64 drill bit to pin this in location once you get it bolted on there. So alright, I'm gonna try to show you this, because this is actually kind of important. Okay, so you got your timing gear here. When the crankshaft key lines up with this line right here, that is number 1 TDC. So when you're setting up your timing, spin it 90 degrees past and then backwards up to there. And that way, if there's any valves in the way, you shouldn't hit them, right? That's how you're supposed to time the motor. So I've got it set there. Now I will rotate it back my 90, and then I can put my chain on. Also, there's a dot there too. You line up the dot. There we go. And then when this is pointing straight up, there's a little dowel on the cam. When that's pointing straight up, that's when this is at number 1 TDC, when the head is at TDC. So that's where we want to be. Now we can try to get our chain on. Alright, so we got the guides in. Now it's time to install the tensioner. So this is the tensioner. You go like that, and it doesn't want to do anything. So you kind of Give it a little bit of room, go like that, and stick a drill bit through there to lock it. And then you just screw it in, pull the tab, and push it out as far as it'll go, and you're done. Then give your engine a couple of spins to make sure everything's timed and you don't feel anything smash. Did it right, you shouldn't. As soon as that gets oil pressure, it'll push on her. Then we pull this dowel pin, and we grab our crescent wrench, and we give her at least 2 rotations, because that means everything should move, but I always go like 4 or 6. I kind of get carried away when I do it. So I'm going to give this motor a bunch of spins, and hopefully I don't feel anything bad happen. At least if I feel it, I should be able to stop. Alright, so here we go. Alright. You guys got to see the head bounce up and down. I didn't. At this rate, we're pretty much ready to throw a timing cover on. I'll give it one last hose down with brake clean before I do that. Make sure I got all any residual hand grossness out of there. And then we'll silicone that and put on a timing cover. Oh, no, we're getting cold. It is starting to rain. Alright, so yesterday before we got rained out, we got the timing all done. It's all timed. We spun the motor. Everything's good. I just gave it a nice spray down with some brake clean again. We got our timing cover ready to go, but I got a little tip or a trick here. So when you're putting your timing cover on in that tight space, this can be it can get frustrating. But if you have a spare lower crank gear, if you put that from the front side, you can use that to line up your oil pump, and then that'll slide onto the flats on that a whole lot easier when you get it all lined up, and then you just pull that out and put your seal in. So that's what I'm going to do. So I guess we're going to get set up and we'll silicone. I like to silicone the block, because if you silicone this thing and then try to squeeze it through here, you just basically smear it everywhere other than where it needs to be. So it's a lot easier and it stays if you put it on the block, I find. So let's get set up and get going. Okay guys, I know I just made that look really easy, but that's the easiest one that's ever gone in. But that's kind of the trick. You have the motor jacked up a bit, and then very slowly lay underneath and just kind of guide it up and get your timing chain started, or the gear that you're using to line up the thing. I forgot to silicone the stupid little 8mm bolt hole in the middle here. Don't forget to silicone that, otherwise you're doing this and you're pulling it all apart again. Alright, so that's pretty much all I can do until this sets and I can do it, so it's time for about a half-hour break or so. Or maybe an hour break. Alright, so it's been about an hour now, and we'll get that all tightened up, and then we'll head below, and we'll put the oil pickup tube back on, and give everything a good scrub, and put the oil pan back on. And yeah, then we wait another hour. And then we tighten that, and then the rest of it just kind of flies together. After you got all your siliconing done, this thing just cruises together. So well, let's get those tight. Alright guys, so it's been about an hour. I'm going to tighten up the oil pan bolts here. Oil pan bolts. And we'll tighten those up, and then I'm going to try to get the lower brace installed and anything else in the remaining half hour I got till it's sunset. So let's get at this. Alright, so that'll wrap that up, and clearly it's dark out, so we did pretty good. This thing's pretty much back together. I'm just going to throw the timing or the valve cover on it loosely before I head in, and I'm going to pull it off again to put oil in it anyway and lube the top end before we start it. Alright, so it's the next day again, and yeah, I put that on last night, and I put the spark plugs in just to plug the holes. It's just on loose, it's all finger tight. I plan on taking it off again to dump lubricant on the top before I go and actually start turning it over. But we can start continue on putting on all the peripherals. The air conditioning back on, put in a front main seal, the pulley, tensioner, idler, power steering pump, all the air box stuff, put the hose back on. And then it's pretty, put the motor mounts back in, and that's pretty much the end of it. This shouldn't take more than a couple hours at this rate, so let's get cracking. Alright, so that's pretty much everything up top back together. Now we just got to go below and put on a crank pulley, put in a front main seal, put the motor mounts back on, put a battery back in. Well, I guess we'll hook up this hose. Alright, let's put on a front main seal. So, there you go. It just pushes in. You push it in with your thumbs. Make sure you lubricate the inside. I got a bit of Sil Glide in there. Here's what I use. You can use molybdenum grease or just regular engine oil. Just make sure you lubricate it. Otherwise, the second that motor spins, that your dampener pulley will shear the lips right off, and you'll just get oil leaking right out from there. Ask me how I know. I've done it. I've done it a few times. One time I changed the seal because I thought it was the seal. I put a brand new seal on, I lubricated it, I turned the car over only to watch it instantly start leaking because the pulley was damaged. So I now, whenever I see a leak here, I replace both the pulley and the seal, because I've replaced the seal and gotten away with it. I replaced the seal and still had it leak, and then I had to replace the balancer and another seal because the wrecked balancer wrecked my brand new seal, which it's not bad. These things are like $4. So it's not a huge break the bank, it's just kind of annoying. That bad boy slides right in there like that. That thing's supposed to get torqued to like 170 pounds or something like that. I just hit it with my impact good and tight. You don't really have to worry about it. The engine rotates clockwise and will actually tighten it while it's running, so it's not like it can back off while the motor's spinning. The motor spins clockwise, so this would constantly be getting forced tighter. I know this because I've put them in there, and if you pulled them out right away, they would pull out. But go back and watch the video on this. I had this out less than a year ago, and watch what it took my impact to get out of that in the very first video of this series. So you don't really have to worry about those backing off. Well, that motor mount's really dirty still, so I'm gonna go give that a clean and then we'll come back and put that in. Alright, so I got the mount all cleaned up. Now, if you're curious, it's like, that doesn't look stock or even as an aftermarket replacement. Well, it is and it isn't. So this, the metal part, is. That's just your typical, you know, $8 replacement off Rock Auto. And then what you do is you smash out the inserts that they come with, and you buy these Prothane urethane inserts. And these things are the cat's ass. They are literally, in my opinion, the best thing you can do to your Saturn. They last forever, and the original ones from factory lasted forever too. But once they blow out, you're stuck buying those, you know, $8 ones from Rock Auto with the flimsy rubber with all the voids in it, and they blow out real quick. 10 years ago, when I decided to put in my first set of these, it was because I had to replace them, and I replaced them with your, you know, $8 ones, and any of the ones, $20, doesn't matter, and they have the voids in them. I blew them out in 3 weeks delivering pizza. It was completely destroyed in 3 weeks. I got no mileage out of it. And then I went and I got these, and I still have that set, and I delivered pizza for years after I got that set, and I still have that set, and they're still good as new, and they are like 11 years old with over 100,000 K on them, and they are just as good as the day I bought them. So for the $90 Canadian to get the set of these, absolutely worth it. It comes with two of these each size, because there's an exact mount like this over on your transmission side under your battery box. And this is like the best thing you can buy for your car. Alright, so we're done down here. I'm gonna go back up top and finish up the little bit that's left up there. Alright, now we're gonna do the upper mount. Now there's two designs of these. There's the first design that looks like this, where it's solid, like right through, no voids, no nothing, and it's good and solid. And the second design has a void, and it's just a little cutout right there, and you can kind of see through it. Now, I like to stay with these ones because they last longer. The voids are supposed to help with better vibration absorption and all that stuff, but I find the longevity there just isn't there to support it. You're changing the mount too often, I figure. So, I like to run these. Now, I know guys on Facebook are making the ground pounder style ones with the circular urethane, and they're custom making them. And yes, I want a set, but I also want 5 of them, and those guys want, you know, decent money for their work as well. They should. So I will eventually upgrade to those and get away from factory bushings or factory mounts altogether, but I just haven't got there yet. Alright, so there we go. We're pretty well all put back together, except it just needs oil, and I gotta put the battery back in, but I'll do that one and put oil in it. And tighten the valve cover down. Silicone still isn't technically set for another few hours from now for the full 24-hour cure, so I'm gonna leave it for a few days, and then we'll put some oil in it. We'll fire it up. We'll see how it sounds. Hopefully it sounds good, and hopefully it runs for longer than 4 seconds. Alright, here we are, moment of truth. Everything is back together, everything's good, engine's full of oil, this is tight, battery's in. I haven't filled it with coolant yet because I usually do that while it's running on its first start, just in case something goes wrong. It usually goes wrong really quick, and it saves you dumping out a bunch of coolant and one less fluid to deal with if you have to take it all apart again because you mess something up. The power steering system is good to go with its new pump, although there was issue. Apparently it was also leaking from the rack, so I stole a rack from a parts car and shoved it in there, and we seem to be good, so that's good. So I guess, yeah, we'll get on to how I start an engine for the first time. So I go to my fuse box, and I open that up, and then I look for PCMB, which on these cars is right there. That's PCMB, which would be this 10 amp fuse right here, and you pull that. It does move around the fuse box from car to car or generation to generation. So we'll put that there. Now what that'll do is that'll prevent us from getting spark, and it'll prevent us from getting fuel. So the engine will just crank. And the reason we want to do that is I want to build oil pressure before I start the engine for the first time. Make sure everything's good and lubed. If you're doing this, I installed a gauge. If you want to know how to do that, I did one in a video a few videos ago in my car. And same deal, and you'll notice in there that I say to hook it up to a source that has power when cranking. And this is why, so you can just watch your gauge go up as you're building oil pressure with the starter. If you don't have a gauge, then you just crank until your oil pressure light goes out. And if it never comes on, then you've got something wrong with your pressure sensor switch. That light should come on when you turn your key on. So, we're pretty well good to go. Oh, there it goes. And we're holding steady. This one looks like it's going to do the same thing as my 3rd gen and only run 50 psi of oil pressure. But anyway, we'll do this a few times just to make sure. It should jump up right quick now. Everything's all primed and lubed. Well, we don't hear any catastrophic clunking noises while it's cranking, so I'm pretty confident that this thing should just fire up. So, I'm going to put this fuse back in its spot. I'll set you guys up on the tripod there. And you guys can watch the engine start from outside. I was wrong, guys. It jumped up to 61, 62 psi right off the start there, and it sounds great. That ticking should subside as the lifters get full of oil. You fill them, you pre-fill them, but sometimes it's just not enough. Oh hey, I'm not leaking anything, everything's good. I'm going to start adding coolant. High oil pressure. A little bit of smoke, but that's probably just some stuff burning off. Yeah. Oh yeah, I dripped some power steering fluid on the exhaust yesterday doing the power steering rack, so that's what that smoke is. It runs, it smokes apparently. That'll go away, we'll take it for a drive or whatever, or I will. That'll probably be the end of this video, and then, yeah, well, we'll see you later, and do the things if you want to do the things. If you don't want to do the things, don't bother. I don't 90% of the time, so I can't ask anyone else to. But anyway, take her easy.